Welcome to the Charity Retail Virtual Market. This is the chance to find out about the newest products, unique insights and tech from our corporate members, and all in 30 minutes. So these bite-sized downloadable webinars are hopefully right up your street. Today, we have Rostify with us, who are going to talk to us about 5 volunteering trends you can't afford to ignore in 2024. I have with me Sam Bennett, who's sales lead for UK and Europe with Rostify, and he's going to talk us through this presentation. And now I'll hand over to you, Sam.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Anna. So nice to meet you all, and thank you so much for joining. As Anna said, I'm Sam Bennett. I head up the sales team for Rostify in the UK region, and here to talk about some volunteering trends that we're seeing in 2024 that, are very important to the charity retail organisations that we work with. So for this webinar, I'm going to do a quick introduction to Rostify, just a couple of slides on who we are and where we've come from. I'll then go into what we see as a potential challenge on the horizon for the charity retail sector in the UK. As well as some input from some of the organisations we work with and from the Charity Retail Association themselves. And then I'll talk about the top 5 trends that we see in volunteer management and areas that we're really focusing on and looking to address with some of our customers. It's quite an interactive session, so there will be, whilst it's a lot of me talking, there are videos in this and there are some QR codes as well where you can download white papers and resources as well. And at the end, you'll be able to submit a form if you wanted to speak to us or download this slide deck or ask any questions. So please do that. So in terms of Rostify, just a quick introduction for those that haven't kind of heard of us before. Our mission as an organisation is all about connecting communities to events and causes that they're passionate about. So Rostify has been in the market now for around about 10 years. We originally actually started as an organisation who were predominantly placing young people coming out of university, coming out of colleges into volunteering and temporary work opportunities with partner organisations that we were working with. So some of those were charities, local cities and governments, but also some of the mass scale events that were happening in their local areas as well. What essentially happened to that organisation is we grew to a size where we had thousands of people on our books, all with different skill sets, all different ages, all based in different locations, from different backgrounds, that we'd placed in a wide mix of different work experience and voluntary opportunities. And that was getting quite difficult to manage in terms of tracking the work that they were doing, tracking the impact that those people were having, and also being able to filter and see our database and who was within it for the best suited opportunities and how to connect with them. So that's when that organisation went to market to try and find a solution to help them manage that volunteer pool, and essentially didn't really find anything that would manage those volunteers in the way that they wanted it to, which was why Rostify was really founded. So with a couple of our co-founders, we ended up building our own platform to help us to recruit, onboard and engage our database of volunteers and connect them with opportunities for volunteering, as well as report on the impact that they were having. That's then grown in size from there. So where we are in the present day, sort of 10 years later, we operate across the globe. So we support events and opportunities all around the globe with some of the most well-known charities that you might have heard of. We have offices down in Australia. We've got a couple of offices across the US as well. And our European head office is based in London, which is where I'm based out of, and where we support all of our European customers, which is our main customer book. So last year, across the globe, we had around 3 million active volunteers who were actively using Rostify, across 10 million volunteering hours completed. And this year, we're looking to grow that more and more as we bring more and more sites on board and try and generate more and more impact for local causes and initiatives. So coming on to charity retail. So Charity Retail Association, we have now been partnered with for a couple of years. And it's a partnership that we see as a long-term strategic partnership that we want to continue to grow over time. So we have a number of customers already in the charity retail space in the UK. We've obviously got conversations as well happening with other organisations that we've met with through the Charity Retail Association, and looking to bring more and more of those on board and help to support their programme. So in terms of some of the trends that we're seeing in the marketplace, there's what we might describe as potentially a problem on the horizon for charity retail in the UK, and that is that I was at the Harrogate conference last year, as I'm sure many of you were, where one of the big key themes was that actually sales targets were getting smashed. Last year we saw double-digit growth in the charity retail sector in the UK in terms of income and sales, which is fantastic. And the headline there shows that we're kind of now at 22% higher in terms of charity retail income and sales compared to where we were in the pre-pandemic. So demand for charity retail is growing, certainly as people look to find ways to be a bit more thrifty, be a bit more environmentally friendly, and give back to some of the causes in their area, which is fantastic. The problem, I guess, that we are seeing is that keeping the workforce to kind of manage that demand has been a challenge. So in that time, whilst sales numbers have increased, you can see the headline there around volunteer numbers in charity stores in the UK dropping by about a quarter in 3-year period between 2019 and 2022. So it's becoming more and more of a challenge for some of the charities that we work with to find enough staff to help support their stores. We're seeing around about 63% of shoppers now buying secondhand, which is amazing. So 2/3 of shoppers in the UK are actually buying from charity stores and secondhand stores. And there's around about, we think, based on the Charity Retail Association numbers, 187,000 volunteers who work and volunteer within the charity retail sector in the UK. So it's still a very significant number of people giving their time. The worrying trend, of course, is if this trend was to continue and we lose another sort of 24% in the next 3 years, that's a huge number of volunteers that could potentially drop out of the pool there. So the space is becoming more and more competitive, and looking after our volunteers and finding ways to engage more volunteers is becoming more and more critical for organisations as they scale. To give a couple of examples of organisations I'm speaking to, and I'm not going to name them, there was one organisation that came to me that said that they're losing 200 trading days per week from shutting stores, from not having enough staff to man those stores. So it's obviously a huge knock-on impact for the charity in terms of the income generating and supporting their causes. I'm speaking to another store at the moment who are actually paying their staff. So they're not relying on volunteers for their staff. They're paid staff roles to man their charity stores, and they've spent a lot of money and investment in advertising on recruitment websites like Indeed, those sorts of sites, and they're still not finding they've got enough candidates to man their stores. So even with paying staff and paying for recruitment online tools, there is still a challenge there around recruitment, as well as the fact that charities are obviously at the moment having less funding whilst this increase in demand is apparent. So don't want to scare anyone, but these are the challenges we're facing, and we've got to find ways to help support and find new volunteers, but look after the ones that we have also. So that brings me on to my first of my 5 trends. So the first trend, and the one I'm going to spend the most time focusing on today, is all about enhancing the volunteer experience. So that really means being able to look after the volunteers that we have and make sure that we're keeping them within the organisation, but also allowing them to be advocates for the charity so that they can go on, spread the good word to some of their friends and their colleagues and their connections. But even if you've got someone who's gone through an application process, making sure that they've had a positive experience so that even if they don't end up volunteering with your store, they're still positive about your charity and still want to promote you, I guess, to some of their friends and colleagues who are looking for opportunities. So we had a meeting with Anna at the Charity Retail Association back in December, and I was asking the team at Charity Retail what they thought the big trends would be in the market from their perspective. One of the big things that they mentioned, or one of the first things they said, was that burnout is going to be a big trend in the industry this year. So that really ties into this very, very nicely, in the sense we've got to look after the volunteers that are volunteering in stores. So some of the ways that we can do that is by making sure we've got ongoing engagement with the existing volunteer pool. We're getting feedback surveys, we're kind of connecting them with stories around what their volunteering hours are actually resulting in terms of the benefit for the charity and some of the causes that they're supporting, and that we're recognising them for their input as well. So when they are turning up week after week and volunteering in store, we are actually taking time to recognise that, thank them for their work and their input, and allow them to at least be able to build up their CV and show that actually that the hours that have contributed to something. The other sort of side of the coin would be around freeing up the volunteer management team from some of the admin. So there is a lot of, and I'll come on to this later in the presentation, but there is a lot of admin that's tied up with managing a retail store, making sure that all of the necessary onboarding and recruitment stages have been completed, and managing the schedules and making sure you've got enough people in the store to man those stores can be really labor intensive. So if we can streamline some of that, make that a bit more intuitive, a bit more self-service within the platform and save a lot of that admin time, we can allow those volunteer managers, those store managers, those regional managers to get out in front of volunteers and make sure that they are having conversations, they're getting feedback on the spot, and they're appreciating the volunteers and hearing feedback of how they can support them better. With the scheduling rules in the system as well, we can make sure we're protecting break times. We're not over relying on individual people. We're making sure there's enough people in store by planning in advance and making sure we've got enough candidates to fill the roles in the store, and clocking people in and out when they arrive as well to track their real-time hours so that we can see exactly how many hours someone's working. They're not overworking in a certain sort of time period, and they've got enough break time as well as enough support from their colleagues. The other kind of area that we looked at with charity retail is that you can have some long established volunteers who maybe are volunteering a significant amount of hours. Maybe they're doing 20 hours a week with one of your stores at the moment. Because the younger generation are a little bit more pressures about time, flexibilities, and looking to find more flexible volunteering opportunities, it can quite often mean that if you lose a volunteer who is contributing 20 hours a week, for example, we might then need to find 4 or 5 volunteers to fill that gap who are doing little pockets of 4 or 5 hours here and there. So that's another challenge in itself, in the sense of you've now got 4 or 5 times the amount of people to onboard and recruit and find and schedule, whilst being able to fill in the gap of someone leaving. So relying on systems and having a process in place whereby you can adapt and take more candidates in through the door can allow us to fill those positions and mean we're less reliant on individual people. Another person we've asked for some feedback on is Carla. So Carla is someone that we met at Harrogate last year at the conference, and she's the head of Restore for Habitat for Humanity Great Britain. So she's doing some great work at the moment with launching the first retail store for Habitat in the UK, which is really exciting. She gave us some of the trends that she felt were kind of most important, and they tie into this pretty well in the sense of budgets are being squeezed across the sector, and the amount of demands on teams around, reporting, making sure that people are having the right communication and training is really labor intensive. So by having a system in place, you're able to kind of scale that organization and that workflow, I guess, without having to rely on increasing full-time headcount budgets or bring on more admin staff. Allowing the volunteer journey to be self-directed and really attractive and easy was another thing that she really pointed to. And again, that's something that's been a bit of a key theme with some of the younger generations that we're finding coming through. So in summary, I guess some of the key areas that we're looking to enhance that volunteer experience on: be flexible and cater to their needs. So if someone signs up with helping your charity and looking to volunteer in store, we often are capturing things like their skills, their interests, their location, their availability. That can't be ignored. So you can't then kind of ask for their skills and their interests and then go and promote opportunities that are completely outside of that. It's all about how do we create a consistent journey for the volunteer, and we're not frustrating them with generic messaging that doesn't really land with what they're looking to achieve. So being able to personalize those communications and knowing our audience for each of the different stores and regions that we manage, as well as translations for things, or making certain communications accessible to different user groups, really important that we can group those users, see who's in the database, and make sure communications are tailored around each specific cohort. I mentioned reward and recognition. I'll come on to that a little bit later in the presentation, and making volunteering simple by placing it in the palm of their hands. So again, particularly with the younger generation, they're looking for self-serve, they're looking for mobile friendly, they're looking for it to be nice and easy. So just to give you an idea, and I know that a lot of the people probably watching this presentation are well aware of this, when you go to recruit and onboard a new member of staff for your volunteering operation in charity retail, there's quite often a lot of steps that need to be completed. So it normally starts with filling in a form or registering someone's interest. There's often then screening steps that need to be completed, reference checks, maybe background checks, maybe interviews, some onboarding and compliance training, forms that need to be filled in. That's a lot of steps, and quite often that can be quite frustrating if it's not kind of a seamless process for the volunteer. So if you're finding that it's taking too long to kind of complete reference checks, or you're finding that actually you're not communicating very effectively throughout this process, If this process here to onboard and recruit a volunteer is taking weeks and we're not communicating consistently, that's when you're going to find high dropout rate. So you might have a lot of people who come to you and say they're interested in helping, but we can lose people along this journey if we're not kind of moving them through the journey and communicating with them effectively during that. And that goes for not just onboarding and recruiting, but also once someone has helped out in store, how do we keep those people? How do we recognize the work that they've done? How do we gather feedback from them? And how do we continue to engage them in what is the organization doing in the community? What do those hours, net benefit in terms of the actual cause that you're supporting? If you're not having those conversations, getting those feelers out there and making them feel connected to your organization, you can lose volunteers, unfortunately, any given one of these stages, and it can be really labor intensive for teams. So one of our kind of main, I guess, retail customers in the UK for charity retail is British Heart Foundation. And they very kindly gave us a couple of quotes based around how they found kind of adopting a digital process with their volunteer onboarding. So they had to do an onboarding step very similar to the one you've just seen on screen. And they were saying that just for referencing alone, we've been able to save around about 15 minutes per applicant. So that's hugely important, not only for the team, it's saving a lot of admin time, it's meaning we can filter and receive more applications for stores without overwhelming the team, but also for the end volunteer, we're improving conversion rates because the volunteer isn't waiting for reference text checks to take as long as they are. It's a quicker process, it's slicker, they're getting responses sooner, and they're able to actually come and help in store quicker. The other point there from Linda, who's the head of volunteering, I thought this was a great quote, was that high street charity stores don't receive preferable rates in most cases. So you are competing against actual retail stores on the market, and you've got to make your charity store look and feel as if it is any other store on the market, on the high street. So it's a competitive space. You want to give it a really positive experience, not just for your employees, but also your customers as well. And your volunteers are the face of that. So making sure that they feel connected, they feel positive, they feel they've had the right training to set them up for success, and that they're feeling engaged and motivated to keep coming back is really important to giving a nice experience for the customers that do come into the store. I've got a short video here, so I can pause talking for a second from Lorna, who has worked with Rustify for a number of years now at Child Bereavement UK. She made some really important points around volunteer experience and how the consistency of their approach has helped to improve that experience. I'm just going to play this for a second.
I think it's really hard for us in our specific position, because we weren't collecting a lot of the data we're now collecting. We don't know what the starting data was. I think if you sort of come from one system and moved over to a new system, you can really see in the sort of the data collection, you can compare like for like, but we don't have that. So something that we have looked into to measure the success of Rustify has been in and around how our volunteers feel about volunteering with us. So what's the difference? And we've seen about a 20% increase. We've got incredibly high figure of, we asked people the question, volunteers the question, I can't remember the exact wording, but it was in and around how likely would you be to recommend volunteering with Child Bereavement UK to a friend? And from that question, we looked at the pre-Rustify. We asked all of our volunteers before we started Rustify that question, and then we asked them in September. And September, the figure was almost 94% said that they would recommend volunteering with Child Bereavement UK to a friend. 94% on 5,000 volunteers is roughly what we've got, is a huge figure to say that they would repeat of people who would recommend volunteering with Child Bereavement UK. And that's increased, I think it's about 17% on what we had last year. So the increase in just that alone shows that we're clearly doing something better. And
yeah, excellent. I really love that quote, because I think it helps to really elaborate kind of the consistency of approach. And there was a link to the full video there that you're welcome to go and have a look at. Lorna then goes on to say it's around that consistency of approach across the organisation. So for their volunteers, having a consistent way of treating their volunteers across each of their different departments. And this is hugely relevant to the retail space in the sense that you've got different regions, you've got stores in different regions with different store managers, different regional managers, and it's hard to create that consistency across the organisation. And that's what Child Bereavement UK have done very well. So when you're looking at different locations, different teams, maybe the fundraising department have fundraising events. There's the, maybe the retail branch, you've got people supporting people in the community. Those are all a different mix of volunteers, and finding a way where there's a central database where Child Bereavement can see each of the volunteers they have in each area. They're sharing volunteers. People are able to cross apply into different areas and different locations potentially when they move around. But having a consistent approach makes them all feel part of one organisation and working towards the same goal. So that was really important. I thought it was a really good quote there, where they've got 94% of their volunteers who are proactively promoting Child Bereavement UK to friends in their community, which is amazing. So moving on to trend 2. So I've talked a lot about, challenges with recruitment, challenges of finding enough people. So one of the big themes that we're now seeing is there's a need to adopt and find ways to engage young people. So Generation Z, but also maybe even Generation Alpha below that, is certainly an area where retail stores need to start thinking about. So there was a great report actually done by British Heart Foundation that you can download in that QR code there around Generation Z. And they were saying that last year, over half of their applicants specifically in their retail stores were from Generation Z, which is really, really interesting. A couple of the stats that jump out to me here is that Gen Z are twice as likely to feel that volunteering versus donating is a way to effectively contribute towards an organisation, and they're more likely to want to volunteer than any other age group. So it is a big market out there of people that we need to be engaging with to help us fill some of those recruitment shortages. One of the big findings from the BHF study was that 37% of the Gen Z volunteers that they've recruited, one of the key things that they were looking for was flexible hours. So being able to adopt technology, put things in the palm of their hands, being able to have that sort of self-serve aspect of volunteering and find more flexible volunteering opportunities is really, really important to them. So just on that point, I guess, don't underestimate their willingness to make change. So they want to make a change in the world. They feel pressured to go out and do social good. And a big part of that is being able to inform them why they should support your organization. So it's not just about coming to help at a retail store. It is very much, what does that income, what are those hours that are being contributed in the retail store actually mean to the organization and the end people, the end cause that you're actually supporting? And being able to tell that story, not just when you are recruiting and looking for people to engage and find ways to come into the store, but actually keeping them as well. You have to keep feeding that message through of updates around the organization and how that income and how that funding is actually helping to benefit people in their communities. Flexibility of roles we've mentioned, so being able to use technologies for them to find flexible schedules in there, but also reward and recognition as well. So actually for things like building up their CV, building up their UCAS application, or even for schemes like Duke of Edinburgh Award, really, really important to be able to surface up the data of how many hours they've worked and allow them to have things like certificates or reference letters to confirm that that's the number of hours that they've worked. So really, really important that we kind of recognise them for that. The last point, and there's a couple of examples here, is leveraging recruitment strategies through influencers on social media. So that's certainly a big trend that we've started seeing. There is another white paper here from Rostify of how you can future-proof your volunteer program. But there's a couple of examples I've spotted online recently where this is an organisation in Australia who have found a big decrease in volunteer numbers. And one of the things that they went to do was actually go and hire a marketing agency to rebrand their entire volunteer experience, specifically focusing on TikTok, Spotify, and Instagram. So very much short, snappy video content of what it's like to volunteer with that organisation and why people should be volunteering with that organisation. Spotify content, podcasts, audio content that they can listen to as well, just to try and engage that new audience and find ways for them to start to come into the funnel and maybe start to think about volunteering with that charity. We've seen it as well with one of our customers. So Crisis is one of our retail customers in the UK. The biggest kind of period of their year essentially is around the Christmas period. So Crisis at Christmas is a big campaign that you'll have seen adverts around for, particularly if you live in the London area. But you might well have seen online as well, they've had a big push on TikTok. So they've had well-known faces, celebrities that have been promoting their cause and really telling the story of what Crisis do and educating people on how their cause kind of fits with the wider community and some of the work that they do. So that's a big strategy that they've been pushing on to try and find younger people coming through their recruitment channels. I also found this other story online, which I thought was amazing, for an organization called Be My Eyes. So I've got no affiliation with them whatsoever, but I saw that there was someone who'd volunteered with them on TikTok. So it's actually an organization that is supporting the visually impaired, and they will support them with things like sorting through their mail that they've received. This girl here on TikTok had made a video about her experience. It was actually pretty funny, of how she helped to support an old man sorting through his mail. That video received 6.7 million views, and the CEO of the organization, someone called Hans-Jürgen Weiberg, said that they'd had 100,000 new volunteer signups in the month since that video was posted. So it just shows that, you know, if you get the right engagement out there, you get some communication around what it's like to volunteer and what it actually means to the right channels. There are certainly markets out there where you can get new people through the door to help your recruitment shortfall. And that leads me on to trend 3. So trend 3 is actually all around increase focus on compliance and data management. And it goes hand in hand with what I've just spoken about. So unfortunately, bringing in under 18s, bringing in young people to the organization to help volunteer comes with a bit of an admin burden. So yes, it's great to have under 18s come in to volunteer in store, but as you all know, there are safeguarding acts where you've got to have a number of adults in the store with those people. There are extra potentially DBS checks that need to be done, extra forms and compliance training that has to be done as part of that. And one thing that Anna was saying from the charity retail side of things is that quite often organisations find that they spend so much admin time trying to make sure that they're compliant for under 18 volunteering, that it cancels out the net benefit of actually having under 18s helping in store. So that's something that's a huge focus. And if we can help to streamline and shorten some of the time that's spent managing some of these compliancy type steps, it might allow us to unlock the benefit of under 18 volunteering more and more. And I did mention earlier around that premise of having the Duke of Edinburgh schemes, those sorts of things, where if we can surface up the data, the certificates, and reward those people with the hours that they're doing, that can then help those individuals as well and give a net benefit back to them. With DBS checks, there's a minimum criteria you have to hit before you actually complete a DBS check. So you can't just go and check each individual member of volunteers that kind of apply to the organisation. So actually, being able to vet and make sure the DBS checks are happening in the right stage in the process can also protect us against being blocked from submitting DBS checks through, as well as training and induction modules. I know there's quite often training that happens in store, but we can certainly help to automate some of that by scheduling online training briefings or training content modules that have to be completed in the lead up to helping. And that moves on to trend number 4. And this kind of ties back a little bit to what Lorna was saying around that organisation-wide approach and having volunteers sitting in different silos and different departments and different systems. So by tying that together, we can really help to unlock not only the benefit of more volunteers, but also more income as well for the organisation. So there's some really, really useful stats on here that I think paint a really clear picture. So here at Rostify, we make sure we integrate with the main fundraising CRM databases in the marketplace, but also some of the donation tools as well, like Just Giving, Give and Gain, those sorts of platforms as well, to make sure that there's a connected view of each of your individuals in the marketplace. So for example, if you have someone that's volunteering a couple of hours a week, but they're also donating maybe £5 a month, it's very important that we recognise that whole individual and not ignore half of what they're doing. Likewise, there might be some volunteers who are donating who could actually be coming to help in store now and again, or at some of the events as well. So one thing that's really important is when you're bringing on Generation Alpha and Generation Z into your database, they're going to grow up, they're going to go to university, they're going to travel, they're going to get full-time employment, and there'll be different stages of their life where they can donate time versus money. So it's really important to keep a clear picture of that one person, and maybe there is times where they don't have time to volunteer with you anymore, but they could still be donating, they could still be spreading the word and fundraising for you. That's enough of me talking about that. So if we go into some of those stats, so 85% of volunteers donate to the nonprofit where they volunteer, which is huge. So the actual volunteers that you have through the door can make a real big impact on the fundraising side of things, and actually donating and feeling connected to your cause. Again, it's really important that you're telling the right story and showing them where that money is going. 61% of people who volunteer for one organisation only. So again, if we're giving them a really positive experience, the chances are it's your organisation that they're connected with, and they're not going to be looking elsewhere because of their time constraints. And lastly, 56%. So volunteers donate 56% more often than people that don't volunteer. So again, huge. If you're getting people through the door and you help, getting them to come and help at your events, coming to help even virtually or at your retail stores, any kind of flexible volunteering they can do can help them feel connected to your cause and want to donate as well as their time. They want to donate some of their money as well, or maybe even run a marathon. Who knows? And that's my last trend. Really, is the last kind of place where we can really fill a volunteering gap, which for me is corporate volunteering. So it's one area we're really focused on as an organization. Is we're helping to support our customers to improve their corporate volunteering strategies, but also looking at other offerings as well. So we actually have a couple of private companies who are coming to us and asking us for curated volunteering opportunities. There are organizations out there, companies out there that are looking for schemes to help them recruit young people, young generations who care about their local communities and so on, giving back days as part of a perk when they're signing up new employees is something that more and more companies are doing, and they're then looking for opportunities with charities to come and help and support. So we've got an issue where you've got companies who are looking for opportunities for people to volunteer at, and charities who are looking for volunteers. So it's really about how do we make some steps to create a link between the two sides, so that there's kind of a marketplace or a relationship that's ongoing between your entity and a local company in the area. So we advise our customers to start small, to look at companies who are based in their area with offices of 50 to 250 employees. Do they have a corporate social responsibility program? If not, do you want to suggest that to them? And being able to create kind of proposals based on some of the data in the platform. So really good example, there's a couple actually in this white paper. There's the Common Good, but there's also an organisation we work with in London called London Youth Games. So feel free to download the white paper. But Chloe at the Common Good has created a really good culture where they've got long-lasting relationships with companies in their local area. And it's a bit of give and take. So whilst Chloe is taking in new recruits from those employees at the organisation, she's able to elaborate a really clear story of these volunteer hours equal X to us. So she's able to report back to that organisation and tell them how many volunteers they'd given them this year, how many hours those volunteers had done, and also telling the story there. So the Common Good actually provide life-saving research for hearts and kidney failures and those sorts of things, and that she's literally able to go to a company at the end of the year and say, because of your volunteering hours this year, you've enabled us to go and buy 2 life-saving heart monitor machines. So those kind of stories are really powerful and something that corporates are looking for. And it's just about having ways to kind of bring people on board, being able to filter their data so you can pull how many hours they've done and then report back to those corporates to tell them their own impact, which is hugely important. And that's the end of my presentation. So there's a lot of talking from me there. Would love to hear from some of you guys. So feel free to get in touch. So my email address is on screen at the moment. There's also a QR code there as well. So feel free to scan that and pop your details in. Even if it's just you wanted to chat or have a look at some of the slides that we've just gone through there, or run some ideas past us, please feel free to do so. We are also going to be at the Charity Retail Conference in Harrogate. I think it's in Harrogate later in 2024. So do come and find us there if you're happy to be attending. Hopefully catch up with you all soon. Thanks very much for listening.
Thanks so much, Sam. Yes, as Sam said, you can use these contact details to get in touch with Sam direct. If you have signed up to the contact list to get this webinar recording direct to your inbox, you may have already ticked to say that you're happy to be contacted. If this has been shared with you, or if you're not sure that you tick that box, feel free to get in touch with Sam direct. So thank you for that very interesting 30-minute webinar around Rostify's new insights and tech. And we look forward for everyone joining us on our next Charity Retail Virtual Market. Thank you.